Y'all, we have a book table over here, and here is 2 resources that I ordered. I only ordered 100 because I didn't know if y'all would want them or not. And they're over here. They're $20 each. I will tell you, they're both great resources. Now, this one, terrible title and subtitle, but great information in it, okay? So I'm actually using a lot of this in my notes. It's called Inheritology by James Wise. And then this one is by Ron Blue, and it's called Splitting Heirs, Heirs. So this one is much more in depth. This one is an easier read. They're both $20. And let me tell you, here's the difference with both of them. They are coming at it. They're both written by Christian financial planners, CFPs. So they come at it from more of a CFP angle. I'm coming at this from a pastoral counsel, like I would treat you if you were in my office and we're talking about pastoral counseling. So I'm coming at it completely different than these books do, but they are great resources on those things. Now, while I'm thinking about it, I saw many of you picking these up, and I've developed a resource table. There's 2 of them. There's one in here, and there's one on the outside. And these are the things that you have to have, really. You really, really need these. And it's basically documents before you die, that you're going to need. So the first one it was written actually by the Wall Street Journal, and it gives you a list of everything. It's just a long list of everything that the Wall Street Journal says that you need, and it's all kinds of stuff. It's a great little resource, and you could take some of it and begin to put those in one place. That's what people will need, in one place. If it's scattered all over, it's really hard for anybody to use that. The second thing is essential documents if you live in Florida. If you're living in another state, it's going to be different per state, okay? But in Florida, you need a durable power of attorney, trust documents, a will, living will, healthcare surrogate. It goes through it. It just lists them. And so then, from the state website, it shows you how simple these can be. A living will, that's a sample. A designation of a healthcare surrogate, there it is. Y'all, when my dad was in the hospital just 2 weeks ago, my mom needed to get some medical supplies for him. It's actually the diabetic reader that goes on your arm. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Okay, you've probably seen them for people. That company is in California. And when mom called, the first question they ask is, do you have power of attorney to order that for him? And they literally would not send it to my father because mom didn't have power of attorney. Crazy. But she said, I've been married to him 55 years, isn't that enough? I felt sorry for the person on the other side, but anyway. And then the Florida Durable Power of Attorney. And then this is something that my attorney gave me years ago when I did my first will. Now, you say, why? Well, it wasn't even my first will. It's probably my 3rd or 4th will. Because what's the most important thing actually, it's people younger than me. It's who's going to get the kids. Because you don't own anything. It's just who's going to get the kids. So we had to do, and listen, right now, I think we've had 6 different people that got the kids. And we need to change it again because Evan, wherever you are, I'm sorry, son, we'd ship you out of state at this point if mom and dad both were kicked the bucket at the same time. And I finally realized, if we're both killed together, there's no good scenario there for the kids. That's what you have to come up with. But here's what my attorney gave me. And it's really, what it does is, some of you in your homes, you have very nice things. You have antiques, you have nice glassware, you have china, you have rugs, you have all kinds of stuff. Some of y'all don't have anything nice. It all came from IKEA, and you don't care what happens to it. And so my next door neighbor, walked in my home one time, and he saw that I had antiques, and he turns to me and he says, I like new. I said, okay. He said, you got a bunch of hand-me-downs, don't you? I said, I never thought about it like that, but yeah, I guess I do. They have been handed down. So anyway, so you just write the item and who you want it to go to. And this is one of those things that it broadens out beyond your spouse and your children. This is things like, I've got things that I want that to go to a cousin, this to go to a niece. It broadens out really big when you get to this point. It's just people that have meant something to you in my life. I have a table when you walk in my foyer that is from Miss Louise Hurdle, and that means nothing to any of y'all. But she was my next door neighbor growing up, and she never had children. And I had known her since the day I was born, and she didn't pass away until after I was your pastor. So I was over 37 years old, and Miss Louise put my name on that table. And I mean, I love that table. It's about 1760, as he would say, a hand-me-down. I guess it was. You know, and it's just a beautiful drop leaf table, and it means so much to me. And anyway, so this is a really cool thing to do. This, you don't even have to have it notarized. It's one of those things that I believe works, and it's I don't know what it's called. What is it called, Todd? It's just an extra document. Thank you. That's the word, a separate writing. So there you go. So those are a few resources. And if you want to know a lot more than what I'm telling you, these two books. Like I said, I got 100. So when they're gone, they're gone. And so right now, we're going to begin with our second clip from Downton Abbey. Now, I need to tell you something. Granny, the Dowager Countess, is my favorite character. And Granny is something else. So I had to do a clip from Granny when she finds out she's receiving a villa in the south of France.
And he invited me to spend some time at a villa he'd just bought. A year or so later, he wrote to me and said he'd transferred the villa into my name. I never thought he was serious, so I didn't pay any attention.
But it wasn't a joke.
It seems not. He died recently, and to his widow's alarm, the villa they've been using every winter for years was registered to Lady Grantham. He never changed it. Now, I'll need some signatures.
Oh, yes.
Why have you given it to Sibby?
Your children are well set up here, and Edith's are more than taken care of, but Brumpton will go to a child of Tom and Lucy's. So darling Sybil's only daughter will inherit little, and I wanted to correct that.
What family did he have, this Montmirail chap?
The widow and a son, the present Marquis. The mother is keen they should take the matter to court.
Well, you can't blame her. Why? If her husband wanted me to have the place, who are we to argue?
You never thought to turn it down?
Do I look as if I'd turned down a villa in the south of France?
I love Granny. Do I look like I would turn down a villa in the south of France? I'm telling you, she is absolutely amazing, absolutely amazing. And so if you don't know the series before it's over, you're going to want to watch it. But anyway, well, Psalm 49, beginning in verse 10, says this: "For all can see that wise men die. The foolish and the senseless alike perish and leave their wealth to others." So here's the question. Who will you leave your wealth to? We're all going to die one day, and it needs to be planned out. See, God ordained two institutions, didn't he, Mike? I think this quote comes from Mike Morgan right over here. God ordained two institutions, the church and the family. Which did he create first? The family. God performed the first wedding ceremony in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve. So these two institutions should weigh the most in estate planning. When you're looking at estate planning, your family and the church should weigh the most. Now, this is not a legal seminar, not whatsoever, but I do have one thing. Legally, a charity has to receive what is indicated by dollar amount. So you need to know it's better to give a percentage than an actual dollar amount. Am I right? I am right. So there's your one bit of legal advice for you who are trying to figure this out. Now, I'm not doing legal advice, but that was it. I'm presenting what the Bible has to say in regard to these matters. So remember, estate stewardship is the single most active stewardship decision that any of us will ever make. So if you do nothing, which is more than 50% of the people, more than 50% do nothing, you need to know you've just made a decision. The state will decide for you, and if you're married, it's even possible your accounts would be locked up until it goes through probate. I mean, I've heard of horrible situations. And by the way, they may very well take a good portion of it. So you might as well go ahead and try to do the right thing yourself. So number 2, if we're looking at this in section 2, wills, estates, trust were meant to be changed. Do you hear me? They were meant to be changed. All wills, all trust, and all estate plans are for a moment in time. That's it. In other words, wills, trust, and estates are meant to be changed. And again, church, you taught me this. This comes directly from our church members. But by the way, it is also biblical, and I'm going to show you that. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob all changed their estate plans. And by the way, if you think you're better than the patriarchs, you got an ego problem. Really. If they change their estate plans, don't think you're better than Abraham. Don't think you're better than David. Don't do that. So many years ago, I would tell you in 2012, after a church service, one of our active members, he's still here, came to me and said, Pastor, I'm changing my will this week. Not knowing the situation, I said, now why would you do a thing like that? The church member responded and said, well, everyone that's in it is dead. I laughed. I said, that is the best reason I have ever heard for changing your will. I said, you are right. You need to go change your will. Everybody in it is dead. It taught me a great lesson. It did. Wills expire and plans change. Don't be so loyal to a bad plan or an obsolete plan that you deny giving a blessing to those that you love and those who are there for you. We have many church members who have outlived their spouse, many, and many church members who have outlived their children. We have some who've outlived all of their children. So church, you have taught me once again that wills are meant to be changed because our circumstances and situations are always changing. Butch Herndon, years ago, and I got permission, by the way, you need to know for everybody that I'm asking this, that I'm pointing out, I got their permission. Butch Wave, he's over there. He loves to talk about estates. If y'all want to talk to him, he'd just love to. But anyway, he reevaluates his every year. Every single year, he looks back over it. Now, he's much better than me. I hadn't looked at mine in years. And that's why I know I've got to change mine right now, because Evan would be shipped away. And so we've got to do that. So I want you to know it is good many times to change your estate plan. We have a clip that shows that right now.
I'm sorry to burst in on you.
Not at all.
The fact is I've made a new will and I need you both to witness my signature. I'm just fussing. It's only my jewelry and a few other pieces.
It's always a good idea to bring these things up to date.
Murray was down anyway, so I thought I would take advantage of that.
I'm glad you've come, because I wanted to tell you that Violet has asked us to go through her things.
What? Why has she asked you?
I really don't know, but of course anything of interest will be referred to Robert and you. I just thought you ought to be told.
No, she wants her death to be ordered and free of bother. It's all very Violet-like, really.
Are we wrong to go to France?
Oh, certainly not. Mary can send a telegram if there are any dark developments, but there won't be.
I don't pretend I've always worshipped at her shrine, but it will be strange. And Mary will miss her when she's gone.
Mary will become her, so the gap will be filled.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I tell you, that's showing she's bringing her will up to date. And she says only a few jewelry. You haven't seen Lady Grantham wear her jewelry. So it was a lot of diamonds, So biblically, do estate plans change? Until I was doing all of this research, I would have told you it is absent from the Bible. That is not true. Over and over and over with all of the patriarchs, it is implied and even implicitly stated that they are changing their estate plan. Let me begin with Abraham. The first time inheritance is ever mentioned in the Bible, God is changing the estate plan. Okay, so it is in there. Abraham changed his estate plan from Eleazar of Damascus in Genesis 15, beginning in verses 2 and 3, and he changes it to Ishmael to begin with. And then when Ishmael is 13 or 14, his wife changed Abraham's estate plan. Did you know that? And Sarah said of her stepson, he shall not be heir with my son. That's in Genesis 21, verses 9 through 12. Sarah actually changed Abraham's estate plan. Wives, any of you ever change your husband's estate plan? Sarah did. By the way, God said to Abraham, listen to your wife, because it says he was deeply grieved. So Abraham had an estate plan for his servant who was born in his house. And by the way, I think it's interesting. Abraham changed his estate plan still a fourth time because he had children by Keturah. Keturah is after Sarah's death. And I believe he remembered Sarah's words and God's word. Sarah was his primary wife, and the word of the Lord, which said, your son, singular, will inherit. So he sent away 6 other sons in Genesis 25, verses 5 through 6. Now, what about Isaac? Isaac changed his estate plans. By the way, without his input, his estate plan got changed. That's kind of scary, isn't it? Without your input, your estate plan gets changed. Here's what happened. The first time his estate plan got changed was when Esau, the oldest son, sold his birthright for a bowl of lentil stew to Jacob. It is the first family disagreement that is recorded in Isaac's household, and it's over the estate. Isaac had nothing to do with the change of his estate plan, and it just literally flipped by more than 33%. I mean, wouldn't that bother you as the parent? Do I not have a role in this? And obviously he didn't. And then that meant that Esau, when he did that, lost 1/3 of the estate. Jacob gets 2/3. Esau gets 1/3. Later on, Jacob in Genesis 27, verses 27 through 29, stole the blessing. So Esau didn't even receive what his father thought he was giving him. He didn't receive any of it. So his estate plan changed again. Jacob, did Jacob's estate ever change? Well, at least 2 times that we know of. First, he thought Joseph was dead. You remember that? His brothers dropped him in a well, sell him to the Ishmaelites, and he goes to Egypt and all that. Genesis 37, verses 34 and 35. And so that changed Jacob's estate plan, who becomes Israel. And then later on, when he finds out that Joseph is alive and he's ruler over all of Egypt, when he's dying, he takes Ephraim and Manasseh and he blessed his grandchildren, and he swapped his hands like this, and he made Ephraim, who was the younger, even more of an heir than Manasseh, which upset Daddy. But remember, Daddy didn't get a vote in that. Joseph didn't get a vote. And he blessed his grandchildren and made them equal heirs to his children in Genesis 48:5. And listen to this. In 48:6b, here's what it says. They will be called by my name of their brothers in their inheritance. In other words, he made his grandchildren equal, and that's why there's 13 tribes in Israel, not 12. And none of them are listed with Joseph. Ephraim and Manasseh are always listed as tribes of Israel, and Levi, by the way, does not inherit. I'll get to that in a minute. So he made the younger more blessed than the older. Now, then you get to Jacob, how his estate plan changed again. It's already changed 2 times. This would be the 3rd time. Jacob, in his estate plan, once again, because of sin, Reuben, his firstborn son, do you remember what Reuben did? Reuben slept with basically what would be like today his stepmother. You know, I mean, there's a problem with that. So Reuben slept with one of Jacob's wives. And so Reuben, who was to receive the birthright, that means he was to get twice as much as his brothers. Instead, it went to Joseph, and the double portion went to Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. and Reuben is left out because of sin. So in Genesis 35:22, we learn that Reuben slept with Bilhah. Bilhah is Rachel's handmaiden, and she's the mother of two of the tribes of Israel, Dan and Naphtali. We would also call Bilhah a cougar. Do y'all know that word? She had to be a lot older than, excuse me if that offends you, but I mean, there's a lot of, the Bible's just putting it out there. It's just saying what it is, you know? So he sleeps with his cougar stepmom, who is the mother of two of his brothers, Dan and Naphtali. That is Genesis 35:22. So part of the judgment, listen, part of the judgment against Reuben was when his father in Genesis 49 verse 4 says these words, 49:4, he says these words, "You're as unstable as water, you shall not excel because you went up to your father's bed." So listen to this. No one from Reuben's tribe is ever mentioned in the rest of the Bible as a prophet, as a military leader, or as a judge. No leadership role whatsoever. So sin has consequences in inheritance. Did you hear me? Sin has consequences in inheritance. In other words, the actions of someone can cause their inheritance to be changed or limited or illuminated. Some sins are passed on generationally, and that's the case in Reuben's tribe. So what I'm showing you is that even with the patriarchs who are godly men, God-fearers, and have heard as directly from God as anybody, that you've got to remember who these guys are. Israel is one of them's name. Don't ever think you're better than them, okay? We have this terrible 21st century mindset where we think, oh, they were so primitive. And you put yourself up on a pedestal and think you're better than God's men in the Bible. If they change their estates, what gives you the right to say you'll never change yours? You don't have that right. It's just not biblical. By the way, this is also true of David. Now, just as a rule of thumb, when your children try to kill you, it's probably good to change your estate plan. I'm just saying, you know, if some of you have kids like that, you need to know it. Before you drink the glass of Gatorade and have the Kool-Aid, you need to know. You need to know, okay? So King David, his firstborn in that culture was always the heir. Are you following me? Always. Amnon was his firstborn, and his oldest son was killed because of sin. That's in 2 Samuel 13, verses 28 and 29. He had raped his sister. So Amnon is killed. He's no longer the heir. King David had two of his first four sons that proclaimed themselves king before David died. Before he died. That's Absalom and Abijah. It ends with, there we go. So, of course, that meant each time David was changing his estate plans. Okay, he's changing his estate plans. So King David literally had to make his wishes known on his deathbed 6 months before he dies, and he made Solomon king before he died. Then he outlined how much he was giving to charity. That's in tomorrow, I don't know. He outlined that, how much he's giving to charity in his estate with Solomon, so his primary heir understood what he needed to do. In other words, like the executor today. He knew exactly what he needed to do. King David had probably changed his estate plan 3 to 4 times during his lifetime, being led by the Holy Spirit each time, because David was filled with the Holy Spirit, it says. And he had to literally change his estate. Now, we're not told when he decided Solomon would be king. Solomon is not the oldest of Bathsheba's sons. He's not the oldest. So we don't know why it ended up, other than maybe the Holy Spirit spoke to him. And finally, he realized Solomon would be the heir. It is biblical to change your estate, your will, or your trust. Don't think you can't do that. As you know more, as you learn more, as you grow more, as your circumstances change, the circumstances of your heirs will also change, and then you are supposed to change your will, your trust, your estate. See, wisdom comes from God. Proverbs 28:26 says, whoever trusts in his own mind is a fool. Did you see that? Whoever trusts in his own mind is a fool. He who walks in wisdom will be delivered. So let me help you here. Many of you in the room, you literally need to bounce your ideas off of other godly people. You got to bounce it off somebody else. Now, sometimes I'm the listening board in the church, but every member of personnel that I just had stand up, you could trust them. And it would go no further. Listen, I keep more secrets than the Pope already. So when people come and tell me something privately, that's where it stays. It doesn't go public. And you can do the same with Dell and Diane. You can do the same with Mark Willoughby. You can do the same with whoever else is on Kim Varnador. You can do the same with Barbara Cam. And some of y'all need somebody else. You could start with your life group teacher, unless they're a talker. I don't know. We must always look to the Word of God. It is so important not to make decisions based on feelings. That's what, just drives me crazy when the people of God feel something and it's so unbiblical. We will go with our heart rather than the Word of God. As one person said to me, everyone is weird when it comes to inheritance. I don't want you to be weird. I want you to be biblical. You can't trust yourself. And if you've got a lost lawyer, you can't trust a lost lawyer to come up with a biblical plan, okay? It doesn't work like that. You're telling a lost person who doesn't even know you from Adam all your financial information, and then you won't trust a godly person, a deacon, a leader in this church. That's crazy. So here's what I want you to do. I'm going to help you right now, and I want everybody to do this out loud. I want you to turn to your neighbor and say this: I don't want to be weird. Here's the rest of it. I want to be biblical. I don't want to be weird. We got to practice again. Let's put it all together. I don't want to be weird. I want to be biblical. Can y'all do that? I don't want to be weird. I want to be biblical. Because, listen, there's no sense in everybody being weird about this. Proverbs 13:22 says this: a good man leaves an inheritance. And we could stop right there. A good man leaves an inheritance. But it doesn't stop there. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children. We could stop right there. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children. And then it goes on. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. So I want you to know it is so much more than money. It really is. It's so much more than that. It's also traditions. It's the faithfulness of God. It's trusting the Lord. But yes, money is a blessing. I want to tell you a little story. It's on Sherry. Sherry graduated with more degrees than I did. She had 2 master's degrees, and she graduated with both of them the same week. You can go ahead with that next picture. And she graduated with both of them the same week from the University of Texas and Southwestern Seminary. She told me when I finished my doctorate, she would call me doctor if I would call her master. I said, baby, that's okay. So I want to point out something to you. Okay, she loved her granddaddies to death. And they flew out there at like 83 and 85 and stayed 10 days with us. It was a riot. Both of them on walkers. We looked like, oh my goodness, it was a geriatric convention. I drove them 100 miles to the church where I was pastoring, and the one on the left, Granddad Moulton, quickest wit of any man I've ever known. Oh, Miss Barbara, like Mr. Lowell, okay? Just really quick, dry wit, okay? So he had that quick wit, and we had been in the car 5 minutes. He goes, are we there yet? About every 15 miles, he'd say, are we there yet? And so I want you to know, Granddad Moulton left the faith of God with his grandchildren, especially Sherry and David. They just love him to death. And Granddad Ferguson, still to this day, the single largest gift we ever got, when she did this double masters and he saw her, he gave her 40 shares of GE stock. He had worked for him for over 40 years. 40 shares of GE stock for each master's degree. When we bought our home here, y'all, it was still the single largest gift that she's ever received, that we've ever received. It was $22,000. We cashed it all out and put it down on our house. And then the realtor told us the next week we lost it all because the bottom fell out. You know, that was when the bottom fell out. But if you're still in the house, I don't guess you lost it. You know, so we just stayed in the house because you couldn't sell it. But that came from Granddad Ferguson. We never looked at it as an inheritance. It was a gift from him on her master. He valued education. His father, Granddaddy right here, Granddaddy's granddaddy, okay, so that's going back a ways. His father put 4 boys through college at the University of Missouri during the Great Depression because he knew education mattered. And so when Granddad Ferguson said, if any of my grandkids do a master's degree, I'll bless them. Well, you're looking at it. She was the first one to do that. I don't know if he had to do that with any others, but that's beautiful. So a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. So Proverbs 13:22b, but the wealth of the sinner is stored up for the righteous. So can an inheritance go to others besides children or grandchildren? The answer is yes. Proverbs 17:2, a wise servant will rule over a son who causes shame and will share an inheritance among the brothers. We joined First Dallas when right before Ellie was born. It would have been way back in like 2002. And we were members at First Baptist Dallas, Texas. There was a time First Baptist Dallas, Texas was the largest church in the nation, if y'all didn't know that, and it was certainly the largest Southern Baptist church in the world. And W.A. Criswell, nobody knows that. I mean, nobody knows that name? W.A. Criswell. Oh, my goodness. He was just, anyway. He pastored First Dallas for like 160 years, okay? So just forever and ever and ever. And in 1974, this is amazing, in 1974, here's what happened. The church had been blessing him, but here's what happened. We heard this while we were there. As time went by, after 30 years, a deacon here, a deacon there, they had more oil wells. If they had 50 oil wells, they would give W.A. Criswell 5 of them in their will. And they just started giving him oil wells and other significant gifts. And here's what W.A. Criswell did. In 1974, it was written up everywhere, and we heard the story when we were members there. He decided to pay back the church every penny he had ever earned from like 1945 because he had so much. And he had been so blessed. And so he gave the church back every penny he had ever earned and then continued to work for decades longer as their pastor without taking a salary. And so it was an example of Proverbs 17:2, where the wise servant will rule over the son who causes shame. So Abraham's servant, before a son was born, was considered an heir. And I've mentioned that already in Genesis 15:2 and 3. The Lord God, what will you give me, seeing I go childless, and the heir of my house is Eleazar of Damascus? I think it's interesting to note here that Abraham did not consider Lot, his nephew, who was in his house, by the way, his heir. He did not. Instead, he was more interested in a servant that was born in his house than his own nephew. So is inheritance intended for good or for bad? An inheritance is designed by the Lord and is meant to be good. It is intended to be a blessing. This is throughout the scripture. In Proverbs 28:10, whoever causes the upright to go astray in an evil way, he himself will fall into his own pit, but the blameless will inherit good. So is it just a financial blessing? No. Inheriting good can be partly financial, but it can also be receiving the blessings of character, the blessings of faith, the blessings of trusting the Lord, the blessings of knowing how to help the helpless or help your fellow man. In my family, people passed down plants. They didn't have any money. And so I now have a plant from my great-grandmother. It's an ugly thing, but I've still got it. I can't get rid of it. I couldn't kill it if I wanted to. That's why it's from my great-grandmother. I have another from my great-aunt. It's called a mother-in-law's tongue. Isn't that funny? It's about that big. I have several plants from Mama Jane, Sherry's mom, when she passed away. And that's been 13 years ago now. It is much more than material. It's much more than that. It's also other things. So is an inheritance good? The Bible gives a clear answer. Ecclesiastes 7:11. Don't you love that? 7:11. That's where you find it. Wisdom, like an inheritance, is a good thing and benefits those who see the sun. In other words, an inheritance blesses the living. The living. It's no benefit to the dead. This morning, when I was dreading tonight, I woke up at 3 o'clock this morning, and in my mind, laying there, I totaled up all my life insurance, and I said, Lord, wouldn't it be better for me to die right now so that I could bless everybody and be out of here? And I thought, Sherry looked at me later on, she said, you did what? She said, that's messed up. I said, you don't know how nervous I've been. And so, that's okay. It's okay. You know your pastor's messed up occasionally. So an inheritance is a blessing. It's a good thing. If you want to bless others as part of your estate, it is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But it must be managed wisely and according to the plan of the Lord. That is why when an inheritance is stolen, when an inheritance is given to the wrong people, when an inheritance, anything like that happens, as one person told me, it's true, all people are weird when it comes to their estate plans. So don't be weird, be biblical. At this point, my inheritance plan is very simple. I'm not weird and I'm not complicated. It's my wife, my children, and my church. That's it. Because I'm worth much more dead than alive. I totaled up the life insurance this morning. I'm telling you, it's very simple. So look at your neighbor and say, I don't want to be weird, I want to be biblical. Solomon is the wisest man who ever lived. And yet, I want you to know in his estate plans, he was a fool. Here is a man who had everything, and for much of his adult life, he abandoned the Lord, and he doesn't appear to have invested in his relationships with his children. But give him some slack. How could he invest much in his children when he had 700 new wives to please? Most men cannot spend time with their children when they have one new wife. Can you imagine 700? So, I mean, cut him some slack. And that doesn't include the 300 concubines that he had. So men in his day, especially kings, did not invest much in their children. But he didn't learn from David, his dad, and he should have. So Ecclesiastes 1:18 says this, for with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. I am sorry. I'm going to give you a lot more knowledge. And then you have to grieve it out and figure out what you're going to do with it. Some of you will do nothing with this weekend. I'm aware of that. And some of you will make plans. My goal is all of you would finish well and be biblical and not weird. Don't be weird. So Ecclesiastes 2:3 says this, I wanted to see what was worthwhile for men to do under heaven during the few days of their lives. So here's the truth. Even though I've been a little critical of Solomon and he ended up a fool and he was very foolish in so many ways, don't think that you're better than Solomon. Don't think that you can't be foolish like he was. See, Solomon seems very depressed. I would tell you even irritated and frustrated because he is so wise and he must leave all that he has to people who are less than he is, especially in his own eyes. He knows his children are less than he is. I'm not trying to ring your bell tonight, but some of you know what I'm saying right now. Your children aren't what you are, and that's kind of scary. At times, he doesn't even appear to recognize that he's been a fool for women, but he was. He's been a fool for pleasure. He's laid heavy loads on the people's backs and made them live more difficult lives in many ways. He increased taxation. He left his first love and did not learn from his faith-filled father, who was David. This is Solomon. King David let Solomon meet with him on his deathbed. I think Solomon is young. He's probably younger than 30. And David is 70 and going on 70 and a half. And King David met with him in his bedroom and let him literally rolled out the plans for the temple. He shows him everything. King David let him know what he needed to do. He even talked to him about difficult people. Solomon then, when Rehoboam is going to be king, Rehoboam's older than what Solomon was. Rehoboam's going to be 40. You don't think of 40-year-olds as being stupid, but it happens. If every 40-year-old was brilliant, the world would be a different place, right? So you don't automatically get smart at 40. And so he knows that Rehoboam is foolish. So part of that, I believe, is the Lord's judgment on Solomon because he's worshiped other gods and he's abandoned the Lord for a long time in his life. So look at how the wisest man in the world thought about inheritance. Even though he had inherited the kingdom with lands, houses, gold, silver, crowns, and jewels, look at how Solomon thought about leaving his inheritance to his children, especially Rehoboam. We find it beginning in verse 18 of chapter 2 of Ecclesiastes, and here it is. I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun. Sounds like a depressed person. I hope you don't hate your house. You don't need to do that in your last years because I must leave them to one who comes after me. That's why he hates them. I got to give them away. Verse 19, and who knows whether he will be wise, he'll be a wise man or a fool. Yet he will have control over all the work into which I have poured my effort and my skill under the sun. Somebody else is going to get your IRA. Somebody else is going to have your 401k. Somebody else is going to have it. And this is Solomon's dilemma. Verse 21, for a man may do his work with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then he must leave all that he owns to someone who has not worked for it. This too is meaningless and a great misfortune. Solomon is not happy. Verse 26, the end of it. But to the sinner, he gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth to hand it over to the one who pleases God. He might be talking to himself right there. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. So the old axiom is this. If you chase two rabbits, both will escape. You hear me? If you chase two rabbits, they're going to both get away. Solomon had too many goals, too many things. He was spread too thin. In Ecclesiastes chapter 2, he has at least 8 goals. Listen, if your retirement plan has like 16 things, part of it, it's too complicated. It's just too much. And your estate is the same way. You don't need 38 things in your estate plan. That's getting crazy. You don't need all that. So he had too much. Solomon eventually narrowed his focus, but it took him a lifetime in the entire book of Ecclesiastes to do so. He didn't narrow his focus till Ecclesiastes 12. So how about you? Have you figured out your focus? Some of you in here have no idea how to start an estate plan. You hadn't even thought about doing a will. You wouldn't even put your spouse in it. Boy, you're just all over the place. How do you make major decisions? This is key. How do you make major decisions? Do you listen to a lost lawyer who's drawing up your, not Todd, okay? Do you listen to a lost lawyer who's drawing up your legal documents, or do you ask the Lord? Do you ask your life group teacher or like people in this room that I've mentioned? Do you ask trusted friends? Would you ask a trusted family member or on how to follow the Lord? Would you ask your pastor? Do you have a way of determining your focus in regards to inheritance on what really matters and what really counts? So I want you to make a checklist so that you can do these important decisions about where to invest. Where to invest. Here it is. Number 1, is this consistent with the Bible? Is it consistent with the Bible? If it's not consistent with the Bible, don't do it. Okay? Just don't do it. And we'll get into a lot of that tomorrow about what's not consistent with the Bible. Okay, so you just need to know that. Number 2, is this consistent with biblical priorities? There are priorities scripturally. There's priorities within your family. Is it consistent with that? Number 3, and this is so important because this is where we leave people out, because in your estate plans, remember, almost everybody's weird. What do my trusted friends say? This is godly people. These are Christians. This is not your poker playing buddies where you're doing shots. Okay? Not that any Baptists have ever done that. But I've been to my family reunion, so I know better. What do trusted friends say? Just had a picture run through my mind, Dave. So your life group teacher, your pastor, other godly friends. I've mentioned Barbara Cam, Mark Willoughby, Kim Varnador, Kurt Vobel. You can talk to deacons. You need to include other people in that. Not the world. Not the world. You don't need to include 16 other people in your estate plan. I'm talking about like 1, 2. You know, the Bible says there's wisdom in many counselors. Just 1 or 2. You don't need 38 people doing that. That's too much. So Solomon, throughout this chapter in Ecclesiastes and others, is showing that hard work does not bear lasting fruit when it is solely to earn more money and gain possessions. If it's just to earn more money. See, not only will everything be left behind in death, but it may be left to those who not only have done nothing to earn it, but will most likely not care for it, and what has been gained will be lost. Hard work done with proper motives is the right thing. We have to care for our families and serve God. We have to work to survive, but the fruit of hard work done to glorify only ourselves and then passed on to those who will literally spoil it or lose it. So the truth is, whatever we have is from God. Whatever we have is from God. So it is His to do with as He pleases. When all is said and done, our ability to earn money is God's gift to us. And He gives us the ability to earn what we have. And we need the same ability to enjoy it. Matthew 6:33 says this, "Seek first the kingdom of God, and He'll supply all these things. But anyone who inverts the process and lives as if the money is the goal will miss not only the joy of what he or she has, but will also miss the sense of God's blessing in his or her life." Ecclesiastes 6:2 says this, "God gives a man wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing his heart desires. But God does not enable him to enjoy them, and a stranger enjoys them instead." How sad. So can you give too much? Well, it depends on the person. It really does. That's why everybody's estate plan will be different. But the short answer is this: yes. If you have unwise children, no matter what you give them, it will never be enough. They will lose it or squander it, whatever you give them. Proverbs 17:16 says this. It's been quoted to me tonight. "Of what use is money in the hand of a fool, since he has no desire to get wisdom?" With inheritance, parents and grandparents must be wise. Don't leave a tremendous windfall to a fool. A foolish person cannot handle sudden wealth. It will be wasted. I want to give you a personal example. I don't think I've ever shared this publicly. And after 18 years, I'm surprised that there's still things that y'all can learn about me. But there is. In 1989, February the 25th to be exact, my family began to experience abrupt and very permanent change. See, my mother's parents had gotten divorced many years before I was ever born. And so I grew up with 3 sets of grandparents, actually a 4th as well, but that's too complicated to explain in a blended family. So we'll just say 3 sets. I had, in mom's parents, they were Aunt B and Granddad, and you can figure out which one's the biological by the name, Granddad. And then I had Granny and Dennis, and Granny was the biological. So those were the grandparents that I had. And I didn't call them step-grandparents or anything like that. Aunt B was literally the meanest person I have ever known in my entire life. When I was about 14 years old, they had a little beer joint, and I'm sitting at the table counting the evening money, and she comes behind me, goes beside the refrigerator, grabs the shotgun, and while she's walking it, cocks it single-handed, walks into the other side of the store, and I'm following behind her, and she puts it in a man's chest and tells him she's going to put a hole through his chest bigger than any place else in his body. And you know, she laid out a lot of other expletives, and she was lost. She didn't know the Lord. And it ended up at 18, when she died, she left me everything that she had. It was a little tin building that had been a beer joint. And at 18, I had to pick out her casket. And I bought her dress for her to wear in the casket. And I grieved over that because the nicest dress she ever had was the one she was buried in. And it literally made me so ashamed. So I picked out her tombstone. Luckily, I was on her checking account. I found out that was very important. And I was able to pay for the funeral. My mother was able to find the title to my granddaddy's truck, who had died some years earlier. I was able to sell the truck and pay off the funeral and every other bill that she had, almost. And for an 18-year-old who had just graduated high school 9 months earlier, it was really overwhelming because the medical bills started coming in. And it was tens of thousands. It was overwhelming. I rented out the tin building, and I had at least 3 tenants. To tell you how pitiful it was $125 a month when they paid. That's how much it was. Thank you, Gina. And it gave me a little spending money when I was in college. And so I learned a very valuable lesson. In January of 1992, I went as a foreign missionary overseas to serve as a youth pastor in Germany. And about 2 weeks after I got there, January of 92, that little tin building burned to the ground. And accidental or not, everything was lost. I think that the tenant built a fire on the concrete floor, which didn't have a fireplace or anything. And of course, it went up like a tinderbox. And the problem was my Aunt B had borrowed on the property, and she had put down an 1,800-foot well. And if you've ever done water work and you go 1,800 feet and you break several drill bits on the way, you know that cost a lot. I paid on that for 11 years. And I paid it off right before Sherry and I married. I had it paid off. And I was so glad that I was able to do that. I've often wondered, I read Proverbs 20:21 one time, and it says, an inheritance gained hastily at the beginning will not be blessed at the end. And so there I was paying on an empty hole in the ground that they couldn't fish the well back up because it had fallen so far down in it when it burned. In the Bible, why is an inheritance almost always geared toward the biological or adopted children? It's because the Lord is always looking to the future. Always looking to the future. It's because God is showing us you have to be related to Him to receive an inheritance. There's no illegitimate children in heaven. There's no spiritually illegitimate children in heaven. Only those rightly related to the Father will be in heaven. So only children who are rightly related to the Father receive an inheritance, and only children rightly related to the Father end up in heaven, because there's only God's children in heaven. Do you see the parallel? Do you see the correlation there? There are eternal spiritual implications to inheritance. Get it right, because it matters spiritually. That's why if you're one of God's stewards and you're a servant, you are not to leave your stewardship to someone who is not a servant of God. Inheritance is meant to be a biblical example of our inheritance in heaven.